Okay, I'm going to start off with a little prayer and then I will go ahead and do my piece. So let's take some deep breaths together. Nice deep inhale, longer exhalation. You can close your eyes if you like. My name is Bobbi, and this piece is called Out of the Closet. I am a futuristic geisha, starseed inspiration. I am you and you are me. And together we are everything. I and I, one love, unity, deliciousness. This incantation celebrates divine imagination, co-creative collaborations, multi-dimensional explorations. I invite you to adventure with me through intergalactic space vibrations, new Earth architects for the next generation. Let's build strong foundations of deep love femifestation. This Femifesto is just a start, a dance that moves the rhythm of the heart. The beat is authenticity, empowered sovereignty, uplift, bliss, ride, waves of the mothership. Kiss the ground with gratitude. Your time is now. Thank you. And we'll go on to our next person.
How old were you the first time you had a gun held to your head? I was 28. It was September 2010. A cop pulled me over for going straight in a turn-only lane. He and his partner approached my car, and they had the nerve to ask me, "How can you afford a BMW?" Impolitely, I told him, "I work for the city just like you do," and pointed to the parking permit on my windshield. He asked for my driver's license registration. So I reached back to get my purse, and he pulled a gun out and put it to my head. "Don't fucking move," he said. His partner realized what he was doing and what I was doing and saw the car seat in the back. And he shouted, "Stop, don't fire, she's a mom." Shakingly, I showed him the papers, tears streaming down my face. All I could think about was getting home to my baby. That cop, he made no apologies. He actually wrote me a ticket at the court appearance. Only that cop, the one that held a gun to my head, yeah, he showed up. When I told the judge what happened, he was like, "Oh, you should have filed a complaint." But wait, you didn't really have any witnesses. A complaint, I said? I've been complaining my whole damn life. Isn't my skin color witness enough? I'm a survivor. I live to tell you about it. Others, they haven't been so lucky.
Awesome. That was Tarah. And the next we'll have Susan Richter. Next we'll have Susan Richter. Susan. Okay, so while we're waiting for Susan, I'm gonna go, I'll just do something else for you guys while we wait for Susan. Let's see, hold on one second. Okay, so we're waiting for Susan, and I'm going to do this piece for y'all while we wait for Susan. This is kind of unexpected, so one second. Here we go. This is from William Shakespeare's Two Gentlemen of Verona. This and the 23rd was Shakespeare's birthday, so we'll honor him today with this one. What woman would do such a message? Alas, poor Proteus, thou hast entertained a fox to be the shepherd of thy lambs. Alas, poor fool, why do I pity him that with his very heart despiseth me? Because he loves her, he despiseth me. Because I love him, I must pity him. This ring I gave to him when he parted from me, to bind him to remember my goodwill. And now am I, unhappy messenger, to plead for that which I would not obtain, to carry that which I would have refused, to praise his faith which I would have dispraised. I am my master's true, confirmed love. But I cannot be full servant to my master unless I prove false traitor to myself, yet I will woo for him. But yet, so coldly. As heaven it knows, I would not have him speed. Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's see if Susan is ready. Susan, are you ready? she's coming on. I maybe heard she had maybe some technical issues. If not, Coco, would you be ready to go?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we go with you, Coco, until Susan can figure out what she's doing next. Okay.
Alrighty. In the end, she said, "He must be pointing his finger at me." And he actually was. John Doe was from a small town, big city, the type of man that walks with no intention other than to flatter his own feet and admire his passing reflection on the windows. He was tall and slick and ugly. His hands were pale white, and they had been everywhere, every corner filled with dust and darkness. His nails tasted like bitter tears and dirty deeds. The back of his neck felt to the touch like the skin of a child who grew up too soon, but too late. He was alone, and the calamity that he excavated to invent himself a duty created a whirlwind that got underneath your eyes, piercing slowly at the brain, at the lungs. It was blindness. And he was lonely, and indeed he was alone, and well, he loved her. But if only, and if I may say so, he did not. Now her. Well, she had pulled all the riddles from the ground like ripe fruit, put them in her mouth. She tasted them, sucked on them, emptied them of their milk till her mouth was overflow with tangled universes. As if she had swallowed hair, the strings of confabulated landscapes hanged from her tongue, taunting anyone who came too close to her. If you try to shake her hand or embrace her, she'll defiantly flash you with vistas that she had given birth to inwardly, inside her teeth. But it was very messy, super messy. Messy stars, smeared Milky Ways, tapestries of salt and turquoise, chapped satin lips, and doorways that held her body open like an offering to the unknown. And she was almost broken. And she was kind of crazy about him. Exactly 10 hours and 25,000 later, his eyes. Actually, I think I want to tell you a little bit more about his eyes. You know, his eyes were all the eyes that had seen her, but had also touched her with blindness. All of those eyes coalesced in his because his eyes were the last. They were the last, and they were the saddest eyes I have yet to know. They had an ongoing state of broken, overindulged innocence hanging, lingering. He was invertebrate and ashamed, but would clasp and break her backbone with the speed and impact of a train, leaving a corpse behind just for fun. He was lost. You could see it from time to time in the way that his gaze landed on the world or her breasts. You could see the broken bones, the needles, the sweat. His flesh was scarred underneath the veins.
Okay, bye.
There were bruises and cavities all over. She said, "I sampled the cigarette ashes off of his flesh. I blurred myself in those stained mirrors. I met his orphan and dismembered bravery. I held it. Like a delicate bird, I held his vulnerability in my mouth, kissing it, making my saliva into a womb, gulping down the blood from his old wounds until I wilted. I almost lost my own sense of nausea from being numb to myself. But that was from another time, a time when my hips were concealed and empty mountains. Had I known the capacity of winter in my own hip bones, the seasons alongside my thighs, had I known that the rivers that I crossed were my own blood and the death I recoiled from my own light, had I known that the ominous hands that I feared were my own, and had I known that they were kind, whole, wise, extraordinary. But I could not know that then. I couldn't know it yet. However, what I did begin to know was that the saddest part of his eyes was how they said, "I am not here," while his mouth and his teeth said, "I love you." His eyes holding an encapsulated, standstill, hollowed little boy looking straight into her eyes. "I love you. I am not here." And with a nonchalant, almost sweet smile, as his hands took ongoing knives in and out of ribcage and foreheads, cutting feet into dirt, doing his business of excavating, of desecrating, doing his business of loss. I love you. I am not here. And his eyes did just that. Exactly 10 hours and 25,000 days later, as his fingers pointed at her, she trembled, waiting, just waiting for the wind and the gravity, and she finally broke. She felt her heart drop, finally, dead, culminated injury, broken. And it went like this. His finger pointing, her fingers grasping, his eyes two caverns of rage, taking a child hostage. Her eyes, Niagara Falls, his fist clenched right above her cheekbones at a distance between your knuckles and the tip of your fingers, her hands looking for him, his words cutting deep into her own throat, her voice begging to be held. All of this the night before the day that she was born. And with the fury about the madness of the men she loved, she was finally fractured now. Thousands of millennia, walking without legs, pulling cartilage out of thin air, out of the tear inside her breast, at last rest in peace. Never again. And while he whispered in her ears what was coming, and while all she wanted was to feel protected by him instead of from him, she pressed the accelerator somewhere. The map and the north, the redemption and the pain, her now raw and empty feet grappling for space, moving forward. Never again. Forth from him. From every him who claimed his name on her bust, who buried a stake declaring her mouth his newfound continent, from every him who provoked the beast in her, just for the entertainment, from every him that pointed her finger at their belly button, expecting water to break between her legs, forth from him. Away from the ones that could not and would not forsake the book of their own entitled mutilation, at last rest in peace. And she took every mile into the ticking clock, the perfect clock of her gut, at last rest in peace. In the beginning, she said, ladies and gentlemen, I am her. And ladies and gentlemen, I am not him. And you see, this is forgiveness. As I fall down to my knees, this is forgiveness. As I fall down to my knees, praying, glorifying, I am her and I am not him. As I fall down to my knees, finally free to know. In the beginning, she said, I undressed my calluses at the feet of my Savior and I drank his ointment. My own knees and newfound cadence washed from the dismembered agony. The beloved opened fire to rescue me from the chasms of my own lineage, the chasms of my own denial. And per mile I took further from harm, there was a planet that awoke within me. Beyond Mars and beyond Venus, beyond the moon, a hidden solar system uncoiled from my skin. And I traveled the galaxy. I traveled the galaxy in 93 days and 1,500 miles. And I discovered new planets. I deepened the roots to the one who chose me. And love, oh love, he held me across the ocean. He held me in silence. He saw me. Unabashed, he kissed the mythical creature of my soul, and he pulled my hair with bold tenderness. He perpetually baptizes the wild and feeling shape of my astronomy, my anatomy. He cradles my neck as if he was newborn grace. Inside the lullaby of the beard of the man who has given my moms back their name, I walk in dignity. At last, rest in peace. At last, let the silent movie of real love trace its glimmer upon your vocabulary. At last, let the solid blood of your own choices safeguard the good and immaculate residence of your life. At last, breathe the thick and the thin of your skin without blasphemy. At last, dwell in the reconciliation, in the devotion of his eyes vigil over your gentle and blazing body. At last, rest in peace. In your own collarbone, which now knows how to rest in the chest of the one who will not hesitate to love you. And you see, this is forgiveness.
Thank you, Coco. Okay, so Susan, are you ready?
I really sincerely apologize. I could not get back on the video. I kept clicking video over and over and it would not go on and my mute button would not change. So I was freaking out. So I'll do my best to relax and do my thing. Okay, so here we go. Coming to Paradise, Part 1. My sister recently confessed to me that she walked in on Mom and Dad 9 months before my birth in a beach house on the Atlantic Ocean in Asbury Park. Mom always told me I was conceived on Riverside Drive in New York City at a friend's house one night when they both got drunk. I thought that was kind of cool, so we'll stick with that story. I was born at the end of 36 hours of labor, and Mom desperately wanted to stand up to let gravity be part of the process, but they wouldn't let her in those days. Instead, they extracted me from that tight jam with forceps. Ouch. I wasn't the only one suffering that night. According to my mother, just down the hall were 2 victims of a motorcycle accident moaning in pain. At one point, my father held me and said, "This is the most beautiful one of all." Apparently, this got back to my sister, who was 11 years older than me and not too keen on having this serious competition in her most formative years. When I got back from the hospital, I cried at 11 o'clock every night. I might have had colic, which causes babies to cry at the same time every day. Or maybe I was feeling everyone's psychic pain as they fitfully fell off to sleep. You see, my parents were heading for a divorce in a few years, and Mom was given the advice to get a quickie divorce in Mexico, and I got to live there for 3 glorious years, riding horses in the mountains and going to a private French-Mexican school where we spoke Spanish and learned French. My mother, who predominantly raised me after that in Pittsburgh, had a long list of labels that defined her: atheist, feminist, socialist, an ardent comrade on the road to equality and social justice. Naturally, I followed in her footsteps and became part-time companion, part-time housekeeper as she worked full-time, and always her confidant. I remember one time we were out driving and we had this memorable conversation where I told her that I wanted to work with the mentally retarded, because, which is the term we used back then, because I thought I could help them. I can see here the roots of a developing Jesus complex. I rarely let anyone know that I wanted to save the world, and was really surprised when I grew up and found out so many other people wanted this very same dream. To keep Mom animated, I was always what she called a ham, and would make her crack up so much sometimes that she would pee in her pants. Those were sacred moments. I never talked about her beliefs because much of what she was saying was in direct contrast with what I was learning in school, and my attitude was to avoid those conversations altogether. I kind of wish I had taken it upon myself, my own mission, to study that propaganda and debate her on her beliefs. If wishes were horses, we'd all be kings, as she used to say. For most of my life, I would visit my father, who was a classical musician in New York City, and my prodigious stepmom, who was a champion at all she pursued, about twice a year. That would take an entire chapter to outline that story, because much of my psychological state centers around father issues. Not enough of him and too much of my mother. Out of this confusion and lack of a firm foundation as I see it now, I followed my heart to the social justice capital of my youth, Berkeley, California. I was also a bicycle racer and made the excuse that I needed to train year-round in a more amenable climate. I had also met a boy while visiting another gentleman I had met at the national championships. We could tell the minute I got off the plane, that things weren't going to work out for us. But I did meet his teammate, David, the very next morning at a bicycle race. He was this very same boy that I had been admiring on the cover of a bicycle racing magazine every night for about a month. I'd hide it under my bed and pull it out and look at his picture every evening. Talk about creating your own reality. Here he was in the living flesh, and we soon started up our little love affair while I was still staying at the house of the guy that I was visiting. Definitely awkward. I did live with David for about a year in Palo Alto, working at a bicycle shop while I gained residency to go to the University of California for free. After an unfortunate collision with a car while riding, I finally headed to Berkeley. It was here that I became a devoted pot smoker. I liked the way it made me feel on the inside, for glowing on the inside was not a prominent experience for me, and I had tried it a few times, but to no effect. But like too much of any good thing, it sometimes got me into trouble. I was overly gullible, and the expansive effects of the herb would distort the way I perceived what was true. Things really got out of whack when I met JR 2 years later. Tall, eloquent, charismatic, but homeless and living out of his van. One of the notorious street people of 1960s to 80s Berkeley. He seemed a fascinating purveyor of mystical truths that I didn't even know I was hungry for, like esoteric knowledge and the existence of Nikola Tesla. After all, it was only 1980 and he wasn't yet a household name. I was mesmerized by JR and soon gave up my glorious lodgings and my enrollment at this prestigious school to follow this vagabond of information with his magical books and incantations, and to live in his ragtag van. I saw it as an act of devotion and sacrifice, for just the week before, JR had convinced me that God was real, and I now felt it was my duty to serve this most likely prophet of God. Ooh boy. And then the abuse started. First time he slapped me across my face, it was a complete shock, and the fear set in that day and festered for 2 long years, coloring everything I did and felt when I was around him. I had this distorted impression that God was mad at me for not believing in him all those years, and so I rationalized JR's abusive behavior as something I deserved. He would not let me communicate with my family and blamed them for everything that was wrong with me. This was a daily source of anguish for me. But I was afraid of him and wanted to escape, but had no idea how, even though every cell in my body wanted to do so. I would set him off like a dog that bites when it senses fear. And this would create more fear. And then that would really take him to the brink. I remember one night when he sent me to sleep up in the hills above Berkeley because I was annoying him. And this put me in danger, but it also filled me with a feeling of freedom because I was away from him for once. After a series of misadventures, the chemistry between me and the man in the van was getting wickedly toxic. He eventually stabbed me on the right side of my chest, which collapsed my lung and forced us to have a horrific visit to the hospital. This was all getting to be too much. And almost 2 years to the day, I gave up everything for this man. I finally got my chance to get away. We were in a campground in Northern California, a state campground, and it was raining. I was relegated to sleep outside the van under a large piece of plastic to keep some of the rain out. In the middle of the night, I heard JR yell with disdain because I had inadvertently left a box of clothes out in the rain when I was cleaning out the van the day before. I ran away from this tantrum and hid for the rest of the darkness of the night in a little house that served as a restroom for the park. I had a good long talk with myself, and I had a false sense of security inside those stalls because I had locked the door to keep him out. I told myself it was exactly 1 month before my next birthday on April 16th, and I was not going to spend another day with this man, let alone another month. As I planned my escape, I heard him outside in the nearby woods, searching for me. He found the door locked and threatened to burn down the little house, and after a moment's consideration, I said that horrible man could do just that very thing, so I opened the door. He threw me down to the ground and said, if you don't stay there until sunrise, I will give you 40 blows, which I took to mean he was going to beat me up. My mind was on hyperdrive. I kept saying all kinds of threats to him in my mind as I felt my inner metal growing for the first time in my imprisonment with JR. I cursed him out. I said, as soon as I hear you walk away and I hear that car door slam, I'm out of here. And that's exactly what I did. I was barefoot, but luckily wearing a warm coat. As I made my way down to the road, I grabbed a notebook that I had secretly hidden the day before with all the names and addresses of everyone I knew in Northern California. Probably because I knew on some level it was over and that I would be leaving. I never looked back and had to leave all of my now sparse possessions behind, including a beautiful book that I had written in 3rd grade and that I would still love to get my hands on. As I made my way down to the road, it started snowing. I had never seen snow in California before, but this was getting close to Mount Shasta, so it's not surprising. I went to the other side of the road and out went my thumb. To be continued.
Okay, so now we're going to take a break. We're going to take a 5-minute break. So if you have to go to the bathroom, and it gives us a chance to kind of drink some water, also go to the bathroom, change costumes and stuff like that. Okay, so 5 minutes.